Talofa lava, tēnā koutou katoa. Nau mai, haere mai, welcome to the Early Childhood Seminar Series. We'll begin our time together with karakia, me enoi tātou. Kia hora te marino, kia whakapapa ponamu te moana, hei huarahi mā tātou I te rangi nei. Aroha atu, aroha mai, tātou I a tātou katoa. Haumie, huie, tai kie. So we're delighted to have you with us today for a presentation by Dr. Tawhiri Utumapu McBride, Sala Dr. Solala Tangolangi Leota, and Dr. Jacoba Matapo, where they'll be reporting on a 2-year TLRI study of Pepe Meamea, Samoan conceptualisations of infant toddler pedagogy, grounded upon Samoan epistemologies, values and beliefs of the Samoan child as a collective, holistic and relational being. The recording of this presentation will be available on our Early Childhood Seminar Series YouTube channel after the seminar. If you have any questions during the presentation, please do use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen to ask them, and the panel will respond to them at the end of the presentation. I will now pass over to my colleague, Dr. Maria Cooper, to welcome and introduce our speakers. Kia ora, Maria.
Thank you, Justine. Talofa lava, whaftai mo le awanoa. I am delighted to introduce our guest speakers for today's seminar. All three of our speakers are highly accomplished Pasifika educators, researchers, and advocates who together represent many years of serving Pasifika communities. Tonight, they share some of their research findings from the exciting 2-year TLRI project, Pepe Meamea, the Samoan concept of infants and toddlers. Speaking tonight, we have AUT Senior Lecturer, Dr. Tawhiri Utumapu McBride, who's Samoan born and comes from the villages of Safotu and Levi Salemua. We have Ministry of Pacific Peoples Research Analyst, Salah, Dr. Fa'asaulala Tangoilelangi Leota, who holds the Matai title Salah from Leauva'a and Matai title Pawhiti Mai from Waiala Upolu. Her villages are Waiala, Moata'a, Sapunaoa, Leauva'a, and the village of Vatia in American Samoa. Finally, we have our very own Faculty's Associate Dean Pasifika, Dr. Jacoba Matapo, who has ancestral ties to Siomu and Saanga villages in Upolu. Awhio mai le awhionga, welcome our honoured guests. We look forward to hearing and learning about your inspiring project today.
Oh, talofa lava and warm Pacific greetings and kia ora koutou. So our project team, Jacoba, Salah and myself, and you will see our research assistants. We also have a wonderful Pepe Meamea advisory board, and I'd also like to acknowledge Sa'asia. Sa'asia is our Samoa Aonga Amata in Aotearoa New Zealand. It's an overarching umbrella that is very instrumental in terms of providing support for our Aonga Amata centres. Our centres, our 12 centres, our 6 Aonga Amata centres whom we got to know really well last year in terms of our many Phenol, also our many Zoom sessions that we had. And then this year we were joined by our partner centres. And you can see the wonderful centres who have joined us from the mainstream. The other thing I'd like to highlight is that the centres are all based in South Auckland, Otahuhu, Mangere East, and also Papakura.
All right, so I just want to move now into sort of an overview of the research, a bit of a research summary and just a conversation about the co-design aspect of the research. But before moving into that section, I just want to sort of lay the contextual landscape for which this research project has evolved. Initially, Tawhili, Salah and myself, we've been talking for quite a number of years actually around conceptualizing a particular framework for pedagogy for Samoan infants and toddlers. And there was a special call that came out for Pacific Research as part of the TLRI project back in 2019. And so we thought it would be a great opportunity to actually take up a particular research project that caters solely in Pacific Samoan infant and toddler pedagogy research. So we're really thrilled because each of us do have ancestral ties to Samoa, and the whole approach to the research too is thinking about how Pacific research is also led by Pacific. So it was quite exciting for us to come together and put an application into TLRI for this research. So you're probably wondering why Samoan infant and toddler pedagogy, and it's quite an important question. So it's essential that we understand the sort of demographics of the Samoan population within Aotearoa New Zealand. So in Aotearoa New Zealand, the Samoan population is the highest proportion of all Pacific populations within Aotearoa. And also the Samoan population within New Zealand is actually the highest proportion of Samoan peoples living outside of Samoa, which actually says a lot about our population, about the Samoan population. So as of the last data that was made available through Statistics New Zealand, there were 182,721 people identifying with Samoan ethnic connections living in Aotearoa. And another interesting statistic too is that 65% of that population are indeed living in Auckland. So that is why also we did choose to target engagement in the project within Auckland. The other aspect that I need to mention as well is that although the Samoan language within Aotearoa is the third most common language used, only 44% of New Zealand Samoans are actually able to speak the Samoan language, which also aligns with the intention of our Samoan early childhood services, particularly our full immersion and bilingual early childhood services that cater to language, culture, spirituality, identity, all of these aspects which are quite unique to Samoan culture, knowledge, and also the practice. So this is why in this research project as well, we did intentionally partner with SACEA, which has been leading really in Samoan early childhood ECE for over 30 years. So there's a long history that SACEA has offered our early childhood sector. The other thing to mention too is that the Samoan population in Aotearoa is relatively a young population, meaning that there is a constant or a steady growth in terms of New Zealand-born Samoan. And it can be anywhere from first generation all the way through to third generation, fourth generation New Zealand-born Samoan. So these are just aspects that, you know, it lays the foundation really for us to enter into conversation as to why this research project is so important. but also recognizing that the majority of our Samoan infants and toddlers are indeed enrolled in English medium early childhood centres. And so while this project engages with our Onga Amata, very experienced whaia-onga, our Samoan teachers, this is our second year where we've actually brought on board our English medium early childhood teachers who are in centres that have sort of a higher proportion of Samoan infant and toddler enrolments. And what we're working towards is finding ways that we can continue to expand the Samoan whaia-onga, so continuing in that space, so building up the Indigenous knowledge systems while at the same time working alongside our English medium teachers who are, of course, teaching our Samoan infants and toddlers, otherwise Pepe Meamea. So the research summary and co-design aspect of it really is looking at reconceptualizing and transforming the pedagogy of teachers of Samoan infants and toddlers and really looking at sustainable outcomes. And that these outcomes, you know, emphasize well-being, identity, language, and culture for Pepe Meamea, which is Samoan infants and toddlers. So through the work last year, we really focused on the kind of the core strands of Pepe Meamea, trying to conceptualize what it actually means to our whaia-onga, to our Samoan teachers, what it means for us as research partners, what it means to our community and to our cultural knowledge experts. And so there were lots of conversations throughout the year, a lot of talanoa around traditional practices, around contemporary practices, around the key themes and strands of Te Whāriki. And so bringing all of these aspects into conversation. So that's a little bit about the research summary and co-design aspect, and we're only halfway through the second year at the moment, so there is still a process of co-design that is constantly occurring through the project. So just looking at the overarching questions, in the first year, this was really targeted only with our Samoan early childhood centres and whaia-onga. And what we focused on is framing, you know, what is Pepe Meamea and how is it grounded in Indigenous knowledge systems and ontology? The second question we looked at is, you know, how is Pepe Meamea understood and practiced within our Samoan Aonga Amata and their communities? So in the second year of the project, which is what we're looking at this year, it's about bringing together the partnerships between the English medium centres and the Samoan Aonga Amata, looking at fostering culturally sustainable pedagogies. And we also signal here to tapasa as well, which is about, you know, extending the cultural competency of teachers. And the last bit here is looking at how we can mobilize or utilize this framework of Pepe Meamea, you know, in moving forward, but specifically thinking about cultural well-being.
Is it me?
Yep.
Talo Falava. Thank you, Maria, for that lovely welcome. We really appreciate you going beyond the person that everyone sees. Much appreciated. Those are the 5. We don't know what we're going to call them, but it's the teachers came up with those 5 the domains of what we think might constitute what the framework is. And so the first one is tofa manino, which is about tofa in formal Samoan speech. Describes the wisdom of a high chief, in contrast to whaautanga or the utanga, which is the wisdom of a talking chief or orator. So wisdom passed on and bestowed by ancestors upon an orator chief, a leader, a church minister, or anyone in pursuit of making the right call, the right decision that would benefit the collective. Tofa refers to the sleep of a ranked person or people of status in the family, village, and the nation. As Tui Atua termed it as tofa mana tunatu, sleeping and having an ancestral dialogue with your past. So tofa is a collective term. It's been known that trees talk to fishermen that are suitable to be carved as their fishing canoe, and one who has an attunement with the forest is able to read that spiritual connection with the forest. So tofa is ancestral, intergenerational, and also we're trying to make sure that we don't leave out the children in this work, because at the end of the day, we can say that tofa manino informs the practice. It's our philosophy. So manino is clarity, the absence of bias, nepotism, conflict of interest, and absolute transparency of one's philosophical beliefs that will benefit all concerned. So manino can mean malamalama, it sheds light on a topic. It's also about selection, the best information that will inform our teaching practice. So tofa manino is Samoan philosophy, at which Samoan indigenous knowledge is core. Tofa manino of any type of tofa, if it's not shared, then it's not wisdom. The second one is whaiwale whaatufunganga, which is pedagogy. And I'd like to also acknowledge Sasia doing some work with the organization in trying to put the Samoan words to tapasa. So pedagogy, the whaiva is also a collective. No one does whaiva by themselves. Whaiva is a fishing term that highlights the skills and competencies of people who provide a service for the well-being of human living. Such skills are transferable to other professions and trades, whether it be in the entertainment, arts, medical, or teaching per se. Whaiva o le siva, alo yo whaiva ia manuia. Whaiva comes with a collective tapuinga, collective prayers. So teaching is an intergenerational profession in the Samoan society, highly reputable, as it's about making people succeed for the collective. So whaatufunganga, the actual verb is to funga. Adding a prefix fa reintroduces the verb to funga or amplify the word to funga to ensure to funga is a skill in carving the art of creating new knowledge as a result of successful pedagogies. So whaiwale whaatufunganga is one skill to develop, refine certain pedagogies that will ensure children, teachers, and communities will thrive as learners as a result of co-construction. So those are whaiwale whaatufunganga. Thank you.
Thank you, Salah. For bainga, it's like the foundation of the center. Loto I fale, it's like looking at what's happening in our center in relation to the relationships between the staff, also looking at in terms of our learners, and also in relation to the parents and the caregivers. So it's the context. It's also about policy, about the regulations, and also in relation to the curriculum, what sort of knowledge. And if we think about tapasa, for example, looking at how the staff, how do they apply the three turu in terms of the context of the centre. Relational ecologies, looking at the va between the staff and learners, also the va between the staff and the parents and the caregivers and the community. Anga tau sili, I'm thinking of the first part of the word anga, it's looking at behaviour. It's also looking at the actions. It's about Samoan values. There's about 9 particular values in Tapasa, for example, but looking at alofa, a Samoan word for love, fa'aloalo, Samoan word for respect, and tautua, service. Everything we do, our tautua, our service, is about a love, our alofa, for our culture, anga Samoa. E longo fie le Samoa, e o ngā o ngā anga langa tautala. You can tell a Samoan by the way that they behave and their mannerisms and their dispositions. We teach because we love, and it's the alofa. It's about the love for teaching, and also, most importantly, the love for our children in terms of what we are going to pass on through the generations. And after all, o mātua o whaia o ngā mōmua. Our parents are our first teachers, and this is what comes out in relation to our teachers.
So whaasenomanga is a core strand, and all of these strands interweave with each other. They don't necessarily sit in isolation. So it's just seeing the ways in which these strands also speak to each other. But whaasenomanga is one that really is about grounding identity, Samoan identity, and with that comes spirituality, with that comes the connection, the genealogy. And when we talk about genealogy, it isn't just to people, it's also to place. So the whaasenomanga is also collective in a sense that it is tied to, village connections, to locations in Samoa. But the whaasenomanga, it carries across time and space, and it is also shared intergenerationally. So thinking about this concept within a Aotearoa New Zealand context, it's about ways that we can draw connection to Samoa and the way that we carry those connections with us, even in Aotearoa New Zealand. And we're also mindful that for many of our young pepe, our infants and toddlers, and even our young parents, they might not have actually been to Samoa, but it doesn't make the whaasenomanga any less. So it's understanding that those ties and connection remain, and they are there as part of the identity of the children and the families that we serve. So that's part of the conceptualizing of the Pepe Meamea pedagogical framework. And we also want to acknowledge that each of these aspects come out of a very expansive set of concepts. We had over 182 concepts that came out in our Talanoa last year with all of our Samoan teachers. And these are the core ones that were quite repetitive and sort of thread right along those concepts. So we really want to acknowledge all of the whaia who contributed and actually led the way in this Talanoa about this Pepe Meamea pedagogical framework. So one aspect that we moved into this year as a result of co-design with our whaia with our Samoan teachers last year, was the practice of Falapepe. And Falapepe was something that our whaia were doing as part of their inquiry in association with Sasia. So Falapepe is a traditional Samoan practice, actually. And it's a practice that is almost died out in Samoa. But the Falapepe is a small mat, and it holds an ancestral connection. And through the Falapepe, teachers were able to revisit this traditional practice and actually engage in learning about the weaving process, which we will talk a little bit more as well in the presentation. So this year there was an extension to the Falapepe. I'll hand it to Feli to talk about Falaola.
Okay, so Falaola came out of our Onga Amata teachers. And I just want to say this in Samoan. Na mua mua la langa ai le iola le pepe, which means that the weaving of the Falaola started before the baby was born. So a member of the family, it could be the grandmother or one of the aunties, starts weaving. They start the lalanga process for that special Falaola to signify, it's something special for that baby.
This part is also another new knowledge created by the teachers is Phenol. This is what we call Phenol, the loose strands that haven't been woven yet. So that's Phenol. And we were trying to look at how to conceptualize mentoring. So Phenol came up with the expert weaver. She got the Phenol. If you see in the photo, it's the photo in the middle. Those are the loose strands. They're called Phenol. So we've been trying to look at word. It comes up Chinese. It comes up a different language. But we're trying to look up the word and what it actually means as a verb or as a noun. We don't know. But Phenol, as defined by our expert weaver that day, is that as you weave, I wish I can say I wove this, but as we weave and as the strands finish, they finish, we bring a Phenol and extend it. Now, the tricky bit or the innovative bit is that we align the strong bit of the new Phenol, the Phenol, to the weak side of this, so that it kind of mentors the weakness part of that's slowly finishing. So it strengthens it. So that's Phenol that we're looking at. And why do we do it? If we don't do that, no mat is complete. Why do we do it? It sustains the strength of the mat, the sturdiness, coherence, the robustness of the mat. It also makes the mat purposeful. Otherwise, we can't use the mat. And we have to make sure that the Phenol that we put in to join with the strand that is finishing has to be the correct size. Otherwise, we won't have a strong, tight mat. So how do we do it? When a strand approaches finishing, I've just said, but literally, the mat strength and continuity relies on the quality of Phenol used. Metaphorically for teachers, in practice, how we support and become a mentor is not only just your physical presence, but also our ability to draw on the spiritual energies and synergies that our creator or secular gods, the environment and people are lined up to support our living. So careful selection of Phenol with same width is a must. Otherwise we have a crooked mat. So if we Phenol inaccurately, we have some really difficult children, difficult teachers, and perhaps difficult community. So, and that all comes from accurate observations. We rely to ensure the joining executed at the correct time and with the correct sizing and equally correct texture. That the Phenol that we use is the same texture as the mat that we're weaving. And talk about timing. It is believed that when it rains the night before, again, we are quoting from our expert weaver at the workshop. When it rains the night before, people say, oh, some people are going to go tomorrow morning and do the harvesting. Why is that, we ask? Oh, because the rain actually softens the pandanus. And they have to go early in the morning because the morning dew also adds to the texture of refining and smoothing and making sure that the laufala is meamea. It's very graceful, very, tender. So likewise, these elements of timing, nature, and care of duty through rain, morning dew, and many other roles of nature ensures the quality of the laufala. So that's the Phenol, as in mentoring. It's a vulnerable but very important process for mentoring.
So the Phenol here in relation to our partners coming together. So as we said in the beginning earlier, in our last year, we, our workshops, our Zoom sessions and that with our 6 Aonga Amata centres, there was a lot of coming together to do talanoa, to unpack the concept of Pepe Meamea. So all of that unpacking in terms of getting our Aonga Amata centres and how their interactions with our mainstream centres and sort of in relation to their leadership in terms of the two different services coming together. So in terms of our first workshop together with our 6 mainstream centres, these are the types of words, the types of concepts that were shared on that Saturday morning. So even though these words are in English, other than Pepe Meamea and Phenol, the words that were shared that morning were the Samoan words, language, culture, and spirituality and identity, ngangana, anganuu, fa'aleanganga, and fa'asinomanga. The words that the Aonga Amata whaiaonga, the Aonga Amata teachers, those are the discourse that they wanted to talk to in relation to their practice, their interactions with the learners in the Aonga Amata. Also looking at the sort of skills, the sharing of the pedagogy, the Pepe Meamea pedagogy, because we also had to unpack it in such a way, or should I say, our Aonga Amata centres were doing that unpacking for the mainstream centres. So the word Phenol was a word that came out of our workshops. It came out in relation to our whalelalanga workshops through our main weaver, who mentioned it in terms of, Salah was talking before about the strands from the laufala. So it is like the coming together of 2 services and in relation to the knowledge that is shared, because it's not only about practice that is shared, but it's also the coming together of, because in our mainstream centres, some of the teachers were Pākehā, some of them were Indo-Fijian, some of them were in relation to the Muslim faith. So there was, and some of them were not Samoan, some of them from Niue. So there was a lovely diversity in relation to the not only in terms of knowledge, but also in relation to cultural diversity, but also in relation to spirituality. Yeah, it was, yeah, so it's about the bringing together, but also in relation to the mentoring, the Aonga Amata teachers sharing their knowledge with our mainstream centres, but it was the sharing wasn't just one way. There was you know, there was a two-way process. Yeah, I'd like to say, and it's ongoing, by the way. And it wasn't easy in the beginning, because we had to scaffold the sharing, because sometimes there is this notion, and even academics are like this, in terms of, you know, how much of your knowledge do you let go? And maybe this is something that can, you know, there may be questions about this. Maybe one of my colleagues might want to say a bit more in terms of the, you know, that being that, well, not, I wouldn't say defensiveness, but it's like, yeah, trying to keep your, you know, keep your knowledge to yourself. But in order to grow our Pepe Meamea, you know, research project, you know, that the sharing, you know, has to be there in order for it to work. So in the end, it was quite amazing to start seeing the transformational, you know, the transformational process and stages happening between our two services.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Ophelia. I'll just touch on that quickly, because I realise too that that is something which is about an ethic of care that we exercise in the research project, but that indeed many of our whaeonga and even our cultural experts that we seek support from recognise that there are some sacred knowledges that actually sit within a particular family or a village, and they're not necessarily there to be documented and to have open access for everyone. So we recognise that even in the cultural space, that there are certain knowledge systems that do have a particular hierarchy, and that they do hold a particular sacredness about it, and that you know, the sharing of knowledge doesn't necessarily mean access to all knowledge. And so it's realizing that, you know, part of the process is also honoring the sacred knowledges too that are shared. Yeah, so I'll just move to the next one. There you go.
Right, okay, me again. Okay, so as we mentioned before, we had this beautiful whalelalanga on a Saturday. So not only did we bring our Onga Amata teachers together, us three were there too, and I brought my mother, who's 87, and these were our reflections. We shared our reflection in terms of, you know what my mother got out of it in terms. So this lovely process, it was allowed my mum to reflect about, you know, her interactions with her own mother. My mother is not a weaver, but she would help my mother in relation to getting the laufala ready for the weaving. But Mum also said that in relation to what we did that Saturday, that there were a whole lot of other things that are also involved. And I think prior to that, in terms of the whala ola, you know, the whala, a lot of things happen on that whala in terms of, you know, looking after, you know, in terms of the care for the baby, not only in terms of changing the baby, but also the baby, you know, sleeps on the whala ola. yeah, so there's a lot of activities going. So there was a lot of reminiscing that was shared in relation, to our mothers being there. Yeah, so yeah, quite a spiritual day for all of us.
So just reflecting back on the lalanga, the weaving journey that we've had, but particularly this event where we were able to work closely alongside our master weavers, I just want to recognize too, in this image, you see those circular lalanga, the pandanus leaves that have been gathered and collected. I want to recognize that they've actually been shipped all the way from Samoa. And that was really intentional because those plants grew out of the ele or the dirt, in Samoa. And it's about that sort of sustainability of connection to place. So not only is the weaving bringing us together, it's also bringing Samoa to us in terms of the way that we engage with the leaves, with the strands. So just coming back to my own experience of the weaving, this is where for me research becomes really innovative, because there is a blurring between, sort of researcher identity and actually my own cultural and spiritual identity. And this for me really transcends, sort of a conventional way of thinking about research. So for me, on this day, my mother was also able to join, and my mother is a traditional, she does traditional Samoan fofo, which is baby massage. And it's a practice that I've been observing with my mum for more than 35, 36 years. And just recently, it's something that my mother has handed to me, and it's only something practiced intergenerational, the certain method in our family. But the more that my mother spoke about the mat on the day, it really highlighted the significance of the mat in relation to healing. So you cannot engage with baby massage fofo without the mat. The mat is part of the healing process, and it carries with it its own energy, its own ability to heal as well. And so the mat is a partner with the person who is engaging the fofo. So with that said, and also what Tawhili had said earlier on about falaola, it has started in the weaving process even before conception. So I wanted to share quickly, I'm engaging myself in lalanga weaving of a falaola for my own grandchild. I mean, those of you who know me know that my children are still teenagers, so I'm in no rush to finish my mat immediately. But this is my Falapepe or falaola, and one day the intention is that I will hand this over, and that my first grandchild will be able to learn and grow and have their own sense of well-being and connection with this mat. So I'm very conscientious when I'm around the home weaving that I'm telling my stories and my mother's stories and my children's stories through this mat. So through this process of lalanga, you can see the connections of the Pepe Meamea pedagogy. It talks about the Indigenous knowledge. It talks about the practices, and it talks about the identity, the language and culture.
This, I don't have, my mom has passed on 5 years. So even though she has passed on, I feel her presence was there with our mamas at this workshop. The proverb there, ele siri le tai nei lo le tapuai, is saying that you might lead, but you also need people who are rooting for you, and collective prayers and praying for you to make sure that your favor will succeed. The proverb is used as one of the many proverbs that guide and remind us of how significant ancestral, intergenerational, and tapu knowledge is in this work. Our mamas in this work, through their contribution in the form of tīmai, they encouraged us, whātonutonu, they guided us, whamanatu, they reminded us of the purpose of all this work. To ensure our Samoan, for a start, for Pacific infants and toddlers, their cultural identity is secured for the future. Our elders, I look as is our Phenol, who guide, guard, and are our source of guaranteeing our future children's cultural security or identity is going to endure the next 50 years. So the presence of our mamas or our tina matutua at this in this work, it's not just whalelalanga. In this whole work, we rely on them. They're the ones that we always go back to. They're the anchor. They anchor our work. So in any fishing term, in any fiber, there's always an anchor for the work, and I see them as the anchor and the Phenol. So on that note, we conclude our presentation and we offer space for questions.
Oh, wow. Beautiful. Malo lava, whaftai tere lava. Thank you so much for gifting us with some of the knowledge you've developed with integrity with your Pasifika communities to support Pepe Meamea in our ECE settings. Wow, there's so much to reflect on, appreciate, and process, I think, in our own time. One key message I take from all of this and I embrace is that the idea of looking to the past, the wisdom of our elders, the teaching of the ancestors, looking to our relational connections and the ecologies we are embedded in forms just a starting point for making sense of our practice and pedagogical possibilities for Pepe Meamea. So wonderful. Thank you so much for that talk. So I'm just giving people a chance to pose some of their questions in the Q&A box. And while they do that, you've got a lot of feedback coming in the chat function, but I've got one question to start us off, if I may. And the question is for non-Samoan teachers to begin to appreciate these rich and deep cultural ideas of Pepe Meamea. What do you think they might need to be open to or willing to do first?
Can I, that's a very good question for Lava Maria for those comments earlier. When we look at the Indians that are on board in this work, they may not have a mat per se, but weaving is almost an international skill, weaving, because they also weave their silk for Indians. In Indonesia, they weave the tenun, which is also for their scarves and what they wear. So we have the mat. So what do you call the skills? The ideas are the same because we're weaving. Weaving is an international skill. But for them, for instance, you know, it's to start with themselves. For Indian babies, infants and toddlers, you know, they don't wear the red bindi. It's a black bindi. And there is a rationale behind why they wear black and not red bindi. So again, that's a nurturing, that's a pedagogy for them. So we encourage our non-Samoan to draw from within them how can they contribute to their children, share that, because what we're contributing is Samoan, because at the end of the day, they have to deal with whatever child is in front of them.
Awesome. Tawhiri and Yakoba, have you got a response to that?
Yeah, just sort of drawing from what Salah has said, and also to Fili, we have just such rich cultural diversity in our teachers who are not Samoan, and even from other Pacific Island nations as well. And I think what we've been able to do just in, I mean, because our English medium services have only been with us for about 5 or 6 months or so, so we're still in the process of the Phenol. But what is really exciting is seeing the ways in which our teachers bring their own cultural capital into their teaching practice. And so from a place of strength, you know, we're able to draw connection across. And I think that is the exciting space about it. But also realizing too that as part of a sort of professional commitment to our Samoan Pepe Meamea, more learning and sort of engaging in the research needs to occur. We're also mindful that, you know, having done a gap analysis of Tapasa, there's very little mentioned in terms of Pacific, you know, Indigenous infant and toddler pedagogy. So opportunities to go deeper into the knowledge, I think, is really useful. Opportunities to understand and unpack what the practices are about, including different child rearing practices too. All of those are important aspects that I think we're going to continue to explore throughout the year.
Yeah, whaftai lava Jacoba. And Tawhili, can I invite you to respond to that if you can?
Yeah, as Jacoba was saying, it's like our teachers being able to take on board the funds of knowledge that the children bring into the centre, irrespective of whether they're Samoan or not, but also being able to get their tongues around some of our new words, our new whangongo or, you know, whakatauki type examples, because that's sort of like the beginning of their connection with the learners and their ainga and their communities. And as I always say to our AUT students, don't be afraid to come out of your comfort zone and embrace something that is new, that will enable you to grow, because that's where the new learning begins.
Right, that's right. I absolutely agree with you, Tawhili, whaftai lava. So we have a question from Janet Gaffney, and the question to all three of you is, how has the research experience been for you all relative to other projects that you've undertaken? And there's just a little bit more to that question. What might you say to other researchers who want to undertake such organic co-design research with colleagues?
I think for me, something that really shifted my thinking as a researcher in this project is actually privileging the relationship first.
Yeah.
And I think of a concept, tausi leva, so honoring and upholding the relationship, not just like between us as researchers, but seeing everybody as part of that relational va in those connections. And it means, for me, even, you know, working closely with my dear sisters here, you know, being open and transparent about things, you know, attending to the relationship first, yeah, and allowing trust in each other to try different things, you know, novel things, different ways of engaging with things. Yeah, they've really encouraged me in my growth as well. So I'm in so much gratitude to be working alongside Salah and Tawhili in this.
I'm sure, mano lava. Tawhili, how might you respond to that, your research experience in this project?
I think as Salah was holding up the Phenol, it's like that is how we have grown as a team, in terms of we complement each other really well. The things that Salah is the star in, you know, Jacoba and I have learned a lot through, you know, her strength and some of the things that she, you know, that she shines in and she's so assertive about. And I think it's also about being able to be vulnerable in a space where you feel safe, and that we are all growing in different ways, in the same way in which Jacoba is growing in her ngangana Samoa. And I think she is a star in terms of, and a wonderful role model for New Zealand born Samoans.
She is. Malo lava. And Salah, can I ask you that question, please?
Thank you for making me last, Maria. I'm trying to gather my thoughts on.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, our point of difference is our languages and our cultures. We try very hard to make sure that we use our languages when we engage with the teachers, when we even prepare our PowerPoints, when we present to people. We're trying to make sure that our languages become the language, the norm for teachers in the sector. So and the other point that I'm trying to make, that we're trying to encourage the young people. Pacific ECE is an aging sector, so we always lean towards the youthful teachers, so that we encourage them, because sometimes the more matured ones kind of dominate the talanoa, but we give them the opportunity so that they also, because they're the ones that are going to take over the sector in the next 10, 20 years. So, and encouraging them to have a voice in all this. Yeah, so that's me, Whawhitai.
Yeah, whawhitai lava, Salah. And I think we'll finish with this one question from Peter Ravlich. Were there any papas or males involved in the research? And if so, what did you learn from them? Salah, can I come to you first?
For Samoan teachers, if this is the data I got in 2019, it could have increased or decreased. There's about 2,000 or so female Samoan Aonga Amata teachers. Out of that 2,000, there's, I think, can you correct me, ladies? There would have been around, not even in the hundreds. There's probably only 25 male Aonga Amata teachers. So already we're quite not behind. The interest from our male has decreased drastically. So we don't have any male teachers at all which is sad, because they have a real significant contribution to this work. Yes.
I agree. Yeah, does that low just not having male research people in your community just reflect what's happening in the sector? Yeah. Jacoba, Tawhiri, do you have anything to add there in terms of the possibilities of if papas were involved?
So just in light of the initial sort of canvassing of the ECE landscape, and also putting a call out to the centres to be involved. The majority of our centre leaders and teachers are all female, but we do have access to cultural knowledge experts, particularly through Salah, in terms of I guess the perspectives of men in Samoan Indigenous knowledge systems, because there are particular concepts that men do bring in terms of understanding Pepe Meamea. So we do have cultural knowledge experts who are male, who are also contributing to the sort of Phenol, of the concepts. But in terms of male teachers or leaders, we don't have any in the project, I'm afraid. That could possibly be another project.
That's right. Scope them out. Oh, awesome. Whawhitai tele lava, I'm going to end it here. And I just want to say that on behalf of our listeners and our Panel, whaftai tele lava tawhiri salama, Yakoba, mo le langulanguina o Pepe Pasifika in New Zealand. Thank you so much for supporting Pasifika babies in New Zealand. It is a topic that is close to my heart. It's been an honor to host you today and to hear about your wonderful project. So thank you. I'm now going to hand over to Justine to do her concluding part.
Maria, and whawhitai tele lava to our presenters for sharing aspects of your Pepe Meamea journey so far. Just reading the comments in the chat, this has really clearly resonated with people's minds and hearts, and people are already saying, gosh, when can I go back and watch this again, because there's so much I need to think about further, and I certainly will be one of those people. So thank you for the work that you've done and that you're continuing to do in this space, and for providing inspiration and motivation for us as a sector to continue to develop our understandings of innovative and culturally sustaining philosophies of practice. We really hope you will join us again in the future to share further progress in this really important work. So ngā mihi nui ki a koutou. Thank you so much. To our Early Childhood Seminar Series audience, if you do want to share or revisit this amazing presentation, please do check out our Early Childhood Seminar Series YouTube channel. The recording of the seminar will be available for you in a couple of days. And we look forward to seeing you all back for our next seminar on Monday, the 1st of August, when Dr. Alison Warren will be joining us. So keep an eye on your inboxes for the flyer and the registration information. And thank you again for joining us this evening. Kia tau turangi Mārie, ki runga i ngā iwi o te ao. Let your peace reign on all the people of the world. Kia kaha, kia ara, kia atawhai, ka kite anō.